Hey guys, this is episode 3 of the Family Wealth Builders podcast and video series. Be excited, learn a lot. At the end of the video, you have the opportunity to go ahead and submit in for our summit. We have a summit on October 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, and you guys are going to love it. This is the beginning of some of that knowledge. At the end, there is some bonus stuff that you can only access on the summit. I can't wait to hear more about what you guys think and get out of it. Go ahead and leave any responses down below.
So so the biggest fear is it's talking about your own demise. So because you're planning for the eventual end in the insurance half. On the investment half, the biggest fear is having cash in an investment account and not being able to access it when needed. And so overcoming that is going over their finances, going and doing an actual budget for those people, and talking about they do usually, most people have a lot of extra money. They just don't budget properly, and nobody's ever taught them, unfortunately, the way that they should have. So going over their budget, finding out where they spend their money, and then explaining especially if you're doing stuff that's before taxes or tax exempt, it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference on their overall take home. So then the insurance side, overcoming that is it's better to have a plan and not a plan for your family and not use it, and have no plan and then have to live with the idea that if something does happen to you, your family is gonna have trouble, or business for that matter, because life insurance is very important in partnerships and corporations, because if one partner or board member dies and they have shares, those shares go to their spouse, and what those life insurance policies usually do in those situations is pay off the spouse so they don't have ownership anymore. So it's just explaining look, this is basically a very inexpensive way to support your family in the case of your untimely demise.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I'm figuring out when as you were growing up, your family, how did you,
I'll give you my background. So I have a lot of friends that tell me that they didn't know they were poor until they turned 19, 20. And they're like, wow, my parents aren't worth anything. I didn't know my parents were upper middle class until I turned 20, because I applied for student loans and all that stuff, because I always was told, we don't have money for that. We don't have money for this. I had to live on the minimum. My dad told me he had to provide a roof over my head, food in my belly, and a way to get to school, and that's it. So as a kid, I didn't recognize what wealth or not wealth was, and I had to work for every dime. If I wanted money from my dad, I had to work it off. So we had a ranch, and I would have to fix fence, move water. I'd have to go work for the neighbors, move their water, move cattle, train horses, things like that. And so I valued every dime. Plus the money I made outside of my dad immediately took 50% of it. Out of my hand, and he went to put in a savings account that I couldn't touch.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Well, when I turned 18, he gave it to me, so I was appreciative, right? But at the time, I thought my dad was the biggest jerk that ever existed.
Yeah.
I was getting taxed for living at the ranch, right? So how I learned about wealth is through my parents, because you only have so much money and you have to live on that money. You have to buy the things you want, and you're not getting any more without working more. So to create, there has to be an engine to create that wealth, whether that be using your money like an investment to further that wealth, or you going out and working by the hour to increase money. And the best way, obviously, is to have a diverse group of all. Meaning, it's not a bad thing to go work and earn money, but if you should be taking some of that money and earning more money on top of that. And that's what budgeting and figuring out how much you need. And in my budgeting sessions, I always put entertainment in there. Because if I think you're just working to save for later, it's really not a life that you're going to want to live. But if you have some entertainment, where let's say you plan on going to the movies with your spouse once a week or going to dinner once a week, you can budget for that, and that's great. So then you have some entertainment. You have some life outside of just working and going home that you can live. So, but I learned that from my parents, and so like also being regimented and having self-motivation and remembering why you're doing what you're doing. So setting goals, you have to set goals. Where do you want to get? That, and this is something I learned. So going back, kind of like skipping back and forth, but after I went to apply for those student loans, as I was telling you, when I figured out that my parents did have money and they made too much money for me to get anything. So I had to pay for it on my own. So I was working part-time. I had a partial scholarship for golf for a local college, and working like 30 hours a week at a grocery store, stocking shelves and going to school.
Yeah.
And the U.S. Navy came around and said, how would you like to get all your college paid for? And, you know, when you're 19, you're like, well, hell yes, I'd want all my college paid for. So I went in the Navy. I took budgeting classes there. I came out of that. They have great resources for that, because you have to live within a budget to have a security clearance. Because taking on too much debt puts you at a risk for national security. So, and like making poor financial decisions. So with that said, moving forward, I got into, as you talked about, the insurance field and learned how to invest. My dad's neighbor was a real estate investor, and he told me that he would teach me how to do this if I got into certain things. So we started, I like real estate because it never really loses value from what you paid for it. Especially if you're looking at it as a long-term investment. It's not a great short-term investment, because sometimes you get into these markets like we had over the last 5 years, but most of the time you have very gradual growth. So like, even if we have a correction, let's say in the next 18 months, it's still not going to drop below what it was worth 5 years ago, which is way more than it was worth 15 years ago. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I guess something interesting about that is like, so the cool thing is, I think you learn about the virtue of hard work regardless of how much was there. Yeah. And then you also got so much, like, to the point, and I love this idea of like, he gave you this 50% tax, which made you work harder, but you didn't realize like how good it was that he was doing that stuff. This is really cool. I guess the next thing, and this goes a little bit into the next part, but I'm curious too about, so with the real estate investment, once you started going into adulthood and seeing there's other ways to do stuff, and you kind of already have the idea that I got to work hard to get the thing that I want, right? You see this neighbor who has this real estate process that they're doing, and you start thinking, well, how do I get into that? What was your journey to start to say, let me start building up something in real estate and start having a legacy and start doing something that's longer term and start building that process? How was that to get into your real estate stuff?
That's a great question. So really, I just was talking to him one day, and I had always had this mindset that people that have that kind of wealth and money don't really, like, they've got some secrets that they're not willing to share. But the fact is that when I went over and asked him, I just one day, just thinking I was being a smart ass kid, I asked him, and he goes, well, if you come over here and sit down, I'll teach you how to do it all. So he was open with the information. He didn't care. And so because he had over 100 properties and he makes, $100,000 a month doing nothing. Yeah. So, I mean, he literally fishes, goes golfing, it does whatever he wants, like all the time. I believe he's in Southern California right now, like doing some like deep sea fishing off the coast of San Diego or something. But so basically what he taught me is there's tons of ways. There's basically, you can go onto your county assessor's page, and and every county has one. And you can find out all the properties in your area that have been tax repoed for property taxes, and you can go buy them. Let's say you can get a $400,000 property for like $10,000. And they have 2 years to pay you. Yeah, They have 2 years to pay you those back taxes. If they don't pay them, which if they couldn't pay their payment, they're probably not going to come up with 10 or 15 grand. If they couldn't pay their mortgage and their taxes, they're not going to come up with 15 grand. After those 2 years, you own the property. You just have to keep up the property taxes while you wait.
Okay.
There's another place. You can go to Fannie Mae and they'll tell you, and Freddie Mac, you can go to their website. They have a list of all the repoed properties. So then you can go in and get on the auction, and as soon as you get your money secured. But there's tons of loans out there. Depending on, you just have to do the research. It's taking the time, doing the research, find out what you qualify for in your particular situation. I qualified for veteran stuff because I served 4 years in the U.S. Navy. There's minority loans. There's loans for single women. There's loans for single mothers. I mean, just all sorts of different options that can get you qualified so you can get started. And one of the concepts that Mr. Johnny Weaver, that's the guy that taught me, was told me to read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Have you read that? By Robert Kiyosaki? Okay.
It's a great book,
And so what it talks about is using other people's money to your advantage, meaning taking loans and using it so that you're earning more interest than you're losing. So if you're buying what you would call an income property, which means you're going to rent it out, what you're doing is you're having somebody else pay the mortgage, so it really costs you nothing. You're not paying any money out. They're paying your interest, and the whole time you're earning, your property's going like this in value. So let's say you do that for 15 years, they pay your loan down. Let's say you got a $400,000 property, they pay your loan down to $200,000, you sell it for $700,000. Well, you actually took a nickel out of your pocket, and now you have $400,000 in your pocket.
Nice.
So that's how that kind of works, but you do have to do the research and find out what you qualify for. That's the part that like I can't do for you, Jonas can't do for you. It's something that's you got to do it because you only know your situation and what you would actually qualify for.
And then when you were starting to actually build that up for yourself, what was the process like in terms of mentorship? Like, do you feel like a lot of it was, could you just get the information and apply it yourself? Or did you feel like you needed to have, did he help guide you, or did you find other people that guided you by the steps?
So there's always people out there, but yeah, anytime I wanted to go back, I could ask him questions and he would absolutely answer them. But obviously he's not going to go in and do the applications for me. He's not going to go do the research for me and see what I qualify for. Because again, he's not going to ask me personal questions like, what do you make per year? What's your credit score look like? And there's, even if you have a bad credit score, there's services you can pay him $200, and within 2 months, you'll have 150 extra points.
Yeah.
And that will get you qualified for whatever you want. So you might have to wait a few months, but you can get into real estate investment pretty easy if you have a little bit of patience and you have the work ethic to do the search. When I first started, the internet sucked. Dial-up was a common, right? I know that's dating me, but now you could find this stuff in seconds. So, that
makes sense.
My recommendation is do your research, find out what you actually qualify for. That's the biggest thing. You have these USDA zero down loans. As long as you buy in a rural, what they consider rural, which means not city. So if you just go outside in New York City, for instance, and you buy income property, that could be a USDA qualified loan. That's a zero down loan. So you could use that as an income property. So.
Nice. So it sounds, there's a lot of options to start, and there's a lot of ways to make it simple, and then just getting good mentorship makes it a lot easier to get started.
Very, very much easier. So if you know somebody who's really intelligent in real estate, this is where this guy started. The neighbor was a real estate agent who made himself worth about $60 million by the time he was 37 years old and has been retired ever since. He's 75 now, and he basically still lives on just his real estate.
Nice. Hey guys, just like I said before, we have our summit on October 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. You can go to the link included on this post and submit so you can be on the wait list, so you'll be the first one to know when we're going live and get updates throughout the weeks so that you can see all of the different interviews that are going in. We're interviewing 30 different experts in entrepreneurial family wealth, and I can't wait to see you on that event. Can't wait for you. Go ahead and click above on the post right now and submit your email to be joined into the wait list.